Hi guys, welcome to the Art of Server. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to swap the backplane in this Supermicro 846 server. Today we're in a slightly different room. This is actually my production rack where I have servers running 24/7 as opposed to the lab rack that you guys usually get to see. So apologize if there's going to be some background noise because there are servers here that are running. But anyway, let's get started with the backplane swap on my Supermicro 846. Alright, so in order to swap the backplane of the Supermicro 846, it's sitting right here, and there are a couple tools you're going to need. So I have here a 1/4 inch drive ratchet with an extension and a Phillips number 2 bit, and this extension is kind of nice because it has a flexible attachment point here. So unlike a union joint type of attachment, this is very slim, doesn't take up a lot of space, so it allows you to get into narrow spaces. So this is going to be really useful in getting into some of the screws on the top side of the backplane, because you can't really enter straight because of the obstruction of the fan wall. And this is a regular number 2 Phillips head screwdriver with an extra long shaft that is also magnetized, and so this is going to be really useful in getting to the screws towards the bottom of the backplane. And also the magnetization will help out when in case we drop some screws or something like that, to get them out of there. And finally, I have these Channellock 748 pliers, and these are pliers that I originally got working on automotive electrical things. So in automotive electrical plugs, they're usually very tightly fitted together because they have to withstand vibrations, and they're very hard to pull apart. And so if you were doing a lot of that, it gets really tired on your fingers. And so I found these pliers that are really great for that, and then I realized that these are actually really useful as well for the electrical plugs in a server or any computer actually. So I'll show you how that works in a little bit here. Okay, so to get started on removing the backplane, I'm going to have to clear out some space here. So I'm going to remove the fans and also disconnect all the SAS cables and the Molex power cables at the bottom here. So let's get started with that. Alright, so the fans are out, and I've got a lot of these SAS cables that I'm going to have to pull out as well. And I'm just going to put the connectors of the SAS cables into the holes here on the fan wall, just to kind of hold them out of the way. Alright, so those 3 are out, and I've got 3 more on this side over here. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to show you guys how to do this is that one of the great benefits of going with Supermicro, and don't get me wrong, I like some of the other brands' servers, like I think Dell servers are pretty nice too. I'm not a big fan of HP, but Supermicro makes a lot of their servers compatible with several generations of basically their components are interchangeable across generations. So if you get yourself there we go, that one was a little bit stuck there, but I think I got it. But anyway, if you get yourself an older server, which oftentimes can be found for a really good price, You can swap out some of the older components that are obsolete with newer components and get yourself a really nice server setup. Alright, let's see if I can. Alright. So one of the things that's kind of undesirable when you're shopping for a Supermicro 846 is the SAS1 backplanes. Those have some limitations that won't allow you to work with newer generation larger hard drives that are greater than 2 terabytes on some of the SATA drives. And so oftentimes you can find those systems for a really good price. And if you can also find yourself a more modern backplane, then you can basically swap that out into the old and install that in the older chassis and basically get yourself the equivalent of a newer chassis. So knowing how to do this kind of opens up some possibilities for you to build your own server by mixing and matching some older components with some of the newer components. Alright, so I've got all the SAS cables pulled out now, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Molex power plugs down there. Now, you can try to get your fingers in here and tug at this, but I find it kind of a pain because there's not a lot of room, and I don't even have like really big hands, but it's very hard for me to get a good grip on these things to pull them out. And you eventually can if you have to use just your fingers, but this is where those Channellock 748 pliers come in. I use these to basically grab onto the Molex plug, and I don't squeeze down too much because I don't want to damage the plug itself, but at least get a decent grip on it. And just as you can see, they come right out. So this just makes it so much easier. I really love these pliers. Just like that. And also later on, I'll show you how to use these pliers to install the those Molex plugs back in. So I'm not applying a lot of compression pressure, like I said, because I don't want to damage the electrical connector. I'm just basically trying to grab it firmly without damaging it, and then I'm kind of leveraging off the frame itself, and the power connectors come right out. So yeah, these are just absolutely wonderful pliers, totally must have. Okay, so let's see if I can move some of these power plugs. Just again, I'm going to use some of the holes in the fan wall here to just hold the plugs out of the way so that I have clearance to reach the screws and just not worry about having these things kind of getting back in the way. All right, and one more. Alright, I think that'll probably be okay. Let me tuck this behind the SAS cable maybe. Just have the SAS cable help me hold that back. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good. In order to remove this backplane, there are screws at the bottom of the frame that holds the backplane, as well as screws on top. And then there's 2 additional screws on the side, which I'll show you in a little bit here. But hopefully you can see this, but there are 5 screws on the bottom. So there's one right there. There's one right there. There's one right there. And there's one right there. And there's one last one right over here. So this is where you're going to need the long shaft screwdriver to get down there. And then there are 5 additional screws at the top, four additional screws at the top of the backplane, which are here, here, and here. And these are the ones where we're going to use the ratchet to get into. So to get started, I'm going to show you how to remove the top screws, and then we'll get to the bottom screws after that. So I'm going to use this 1/4" ratchet with the screwdriver bit and the extension to get to this. And so you'll see that because there's this wall here that's obstructing a direct access to the screw, having this flexibility in the extension here really helps. So let me make sure this is in the off position. All right. So I'm just going to break the screw loose. They're usually not very tight, so all you need to do is really kind of get it loose. And then I'm going to go back just with the extension. Alright, so the hardest one is going to be the one in the corner here, because not only do you have the obstruction of the wall here, but you've got this lid sensor here. So let's see if I can get in. Alright, so you kind of have to go at not just an angle to against this wall, but also kind of a little bit to the left here. Alright, I think that's loose. So at this point, I'm just going to take the ratchet off and use my fingers to loosen the, or remove the screw the whole way. So at this point, this is easy once they're loose. Oops. We'll pick that up later with the magnetized screwdriver. Yeah, having a magnetized screwdriver is really helpful because a lot of times these screws are just going to fall down. Alright, so sure enough, I think I've dropped all of them. Should be 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so I got 4 of them. Now one thing to note when you're putting this backplane back in is that these screws, the ones that go on the top, are extra long. So you don't want to mix these with the screws you're going to get out from the bottom. The ones on the bottom don't need to be extra long, and you don't want to put really long screws into the bottom holes because they'll stick out the bottom of the chassis, and when you close it you might end up scratching whatever's beneath this system. And also if you use the short screws on top, they're just not going to reach all the way through because you'll see that the screw has to hold the frame to the PCB of the backplane and then through to the threads that are in the hole on the cage side of the chassis. So put these aside safely, but keep them separate from the other screws. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and remove the 5 screws at the bottom. And nothing special about these, but like I said, these are going to be shorter screws. So I'm just going to take them out with this long shaft. So just to kind of give you a visual here. So this is the screw I just took out from the bottom. And this is the screw that was holding the backplane at the top. And you'll notice it's almost twice as long as the one from the bottom. So just keep that in mind when you're taking this apart and putting it back together. Alright, so those are the 5 screws at the bottom of the backplane, and you'll notice that the backplane is starting to come loose. Oh, and by the way, as you saw in the introduction to this video, I've already removed all the hard drives. So if you're doing this on a system that you already have set up, make sure you have all the hard drives removed, because you don't want the hard drives still attached while you're trying to move the backplane. You'll in some case end up damaging the SAS connectors, and you definitely don't want that. Alright, so let me show you the screws that are on the side. Alright, so here we have, this is the side of the chassis, and there's a bunch of screws here. Now there are, I think it's 5 screws, but you can't see one because one of them is behind the rail. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws here. Those are not the ones you're going to want to remove. You're going to want to remove the 2 that are, I guess, further apart. And those are the 2 that, these 2 here, that hold that backplane. So we're going to remove those 2 screws. Alright, so that's all the screws that are holding the backplane in place. And so at this point you should be able to completely jiggle the backplane loose, as you can see. Now to pull the backplane out, there's a slight lip on this side of the chassis. So if you try to actually just pull it straight out, you're just going to hit that. So what you need to do is offset the entire frame with the backplane a little bit to the left. Okay, so this is the original position, and you want to push this to the left just a little bit like that. Okay, and you'll notice that then this frame will clear that lip on the right side. And then from that point on, you can lift out the backplane. Oh, I'm catching on to a cable down here. So if you feel that anything's catching, don't force it. Kind of take a look around to see what might be interfering with you removing the backplane. Alright, so that's the backplane, the original backplane that was in the server, removed. This is a BPN SAS 846A, I believe. Let me show you that if I can. Where? Oh yeah, right here. So you can see that SAS 846A backplane. So this is a direct attach backplane, and that's why there are so many SAS connectors. Each one of these SAS connectors directly connect to 4 hard drives or 4 slots of the backplane, and so the 6 give you a total of 24 slots. So this is a 4U 24 slot Supermicro chassis. So what I'm going to do is remove the backplane from this frame, and then I'm going to put another backplane in here. So to remove the backplane itself from the frame is fairly straightforward. It's basically removing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 screws. Okay, and notice that you're not putting any screws in the top 4 holes here, because those are the holes where the extra long screws, these guys, will go through and hold it to the rest of the chassis. So let's go ahead and remove these screws here. Alright, so then the backplane should now be able to lift right off the frame. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a different backplane and come back and install that. Alright, so here is it's another 846A backplane. I'm going to be installing this one primarily because I'm actually selling these at my eBay store, and I test every one of them to make sure that they work. And so I'm installing this to make sure that this works as expected. It goes like this. Alright, so I'm going to have to install all those screws again. Alright, so now we can install this back into the server. Alright, just as we had to offset the backplane a little bit to the left in order to install it, we're going to start with this backplane slightly to the left so I can clear the lip that's on the right side here. Go down slowly. Make sure there are no obstructions. And so at this point, the screw holes are not going to be aligned because this needs to be pushed over to the right a little bit, just like that. Okay, so here's a tip for you guys if you're installing this. I always like to start with the screws that are at the top of the frame first. And the reason for that is those are the ones that seem to be the hardest to align. And so I want some flexibility in being able to move the frame and the backplane together before I start tightening things down, or otherwise it's going to be really difficult to align the screws through the frame and the backplane to the holes, the 4 holes that are at the top. I'm not exactly sure why it's so hard to do that, and I think my assumption, or I guess my guess would be that these holes are on the sheet metal that's part of the cage for the hard drives, and this has some flexibility in it, and so they tend to, I guess, move a little bit more, whereas the holes on the bottom and the side, they're drilled into the chassis, and those are not really going to move, so they're more static. Alright, so to get this started, remember we're going to use the long screws that we got, and I'm just going to use this the 1/4 inch drive bit, and I will drive this. So you want to make sure that this is, you see how this is, I'm pushing the screw all the way through the backplane where it's sticking out, okay? And you'll notice, like right now, it's not really lining up correctly, right? So you're going to have to mess with this a little bit until you can get that to line up. So you might have to bend the sheet metal a little bit, and I like to spin the screw backwards a little bit until I hear a click, and then I'll try to drive the screw all the way down. I'll tighten that a little bit later, but for now that looks like it went through. I see the tip of the screw threads coming through this part, so I know that's fully in. So let's go ahead and do the next one. And you'll notice I tend to like to start from the center, and that just kind of helps align things up, and then the other ones will be a little bit easier. Alright, heard the slight click there. Alright, so that screw is in, and I can see the tip of the screw sticking out the other side of the sheet metal there. Alright, 2 more to go. And again, I'm going to turn it backwards, and I hear the click. Alright, and 1 more. Now this one tends to be a little bit trickier. We'll see how it goes this time. Okay. Alright, so now I'll go ahead and use the ratchet to tighten them down a little bit. Again, none of these things really need to be super tight, but I want them to be a little bit tighter than finger tight so that they don't come loose. Now, strange observation, and maybe a question for you guys, if you've worked on a Supermicro chassis, I often find, even with brand new Supermicro servers, that a lot of the screws are really loose. And I don't know why that is, but when I'm taking them apart, I'll notice that some of the screws are so loose that you can basically like spin them off with your fingertips. So I wonder if the torque spec that they're using at the factory is just a really, really low torque spec. But anyway, Alright, so the next step, I'm going to install the 5 screws at the bottom of the backplane frame. And we'll start with the middle screw. Oops, let's try this again. Alright, and next I'll do the one on the very left. And then the one on the right. We got 2 more screws to go here. And then the very last one. Alright, so that secures the bottom of the backplane frame. And then we just have to attach the 2 side screws. Alright, so the 2 screw holes for the backplane are here and here. Let's start with the bottom one. Alright, so that's basically it in terms of installing the backplane back into the Supermicro chassis. So let me know, guys, in the comments, if you worked on a Supermicro server, have you found that the screws are really loose? I'm just kind of curious because I've noticed that in a lot of the Supermicro servers I've played with, and I'm just kind of wondering if that's just me or if everybody else has kind of noticed that. Alright, so at this point I need to attach the power Molex connectors, and then reattach all the SAS connectors. So I'm going to start with the 2 on the right side here. And you might be able to just push these in. Let me see if I can do that. Yeah, okay. These go in fairly easily. Got those 2 in. And let me bring this cable back out. Now, if you have a hard time with this, like I said, you can use these pliers. So let me show you how you would use these pliers. If you have a hard time pushing this in, you basically grab this kind of the cables a little bit. You're not applying a lot of compression, but you're basically using this for leverage, and then just use the plier as leverage to press down on the connector. So if these Molex connectors are really tight and hard to get in, you can use the pliers like this. Okay, but it looks like they're not too bad, so I can probably just do these with my fingers. It's just a matter of getting them aligned correctly. Alright, so the final part here is to reinstall all the 6 SAS cables. So I'll go ahead and start from the right side. And go ahead and remove the SAS cables from the holes there and see if we can fit these back where they were. Okay, that's one in. And this one is a little bit tighter. It has to go under the frame here. Alright, I heard the click on that one, so I think that's good. And let's get this cable out. And this one also has to go under the frame, so let me snake it underneath there. Alright. Okay, that looks like it went in. Or it feels like, rather. Sometimes I get a better sense of this just by the feel rather than visual. Okay. Alright, fourth one is in. And this one has to go underneath as well. Now when you're putting these connectors in here, you have to be a little bit gentle because there are tiny little electronic components on the board and you don't want to hit one and knock it off. Now for the most part, they've laid out the board so that there's somewhat of a clearance where the cables are supposed to be. So, alright, and the last one, this one is kind of in the opposite direction. It has the cable facing downward. Alright, that's in, and I'll put the fans back in, and then we can start testing out this backplane. Alright guys, so that's pretty much wraps it up on how to swap the backplane of a Supermicro 846. And like I said earlier, you can get a 846 chassis for really cheap if you hunt for the ones that have the, I guess you might say, obsolete backplanes, like the SAS1 backplanes, and find yourself a more modern SAS2 backplane or this 846A, which is a direct attached backplane. And by the way, the 846A backplane, because it is direct attached, and it unofficially supports SAS3. Basically, as long as you have a SAS3 controller driving the backplane and you have a SAS3 storage device on the other side, it will connect to that storage device at SAS3 speeds. And I've actually tested that out myself. So, and now that's not officially supported because when the 846A backplane was released, SAS3 was not available yet. But that's kind of an unofficial thing that some people might not know about. So there's somewhat of an advantage in using the 846A in terms of being able to support the latest SAS3 technologies. And, you know, it might be possible that it will support also SAS4 in the future, just because of the nature of it being direct attached. The 846EL1, which is an expander backplane, also installs in a similar fashion. In that case, it's actually a little bit easier because you only have 1 or 2 SAS cables. You don't have 6 because of the expander chip taking care of all 24 connections for you. Now, if you're interested in any of these backplanes, go check out my eBay store. I do have some of these listed, and I'll leave a link down in the description for you. And by the way, the links in my videos are affiliate marketing links. So simply by shopping through those links, you are supporting my channel. and so I'd appreciate it if you did that. And finally, I'm going to also leave a link to this plier, this Channellock 748. If you're interested in picking one of these up, I find them extremely useful. I love these pliers. I will leave a link in the description where you can buy these pliers. Probably Amazon, I think, would be the best place to get them. So I will leave a Amazon affiliate link in the description for you to pick up one of these as well. Alright guys, so that pretty much wraps it up for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you find it useful. So give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe to my channel to see more videos from me. Alright, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.